Welcome back to another BizBite episode of the eCommerce Badassery podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. Today's episode was inspired by a question that I got from a lounge member, and one that I had been asking myself a lot too. Do hashtags still work on Instagram? If you're an avid listener of the podcast, you may remember a guest I had on the show a while back, Katie White. While she was sharing the social media strategy she uses for product based businesses, the topic of hashtags definitely came up. And her take, don't bother. The time, energy, and effort you put into researching them for such little payoff just wasn't worth it. And I'm not going to lie, I was so happy to hear that because I'm sick and tired of hashtags. One caveat to her statement, though, and as I'm saying this, it feels really familiar. I think I said it on a podcast episode recently, but anyway, Katie does put money behind her organic content, and it's part of her overall strategy for herself and her clients. So, in that case, hashtags definitely aren't worth her time. This was also, I think, around the time that Instagram came out and said, don't use all 30 hashtags, stick to 3 or 4 or 5 to 10, whatever it was they said. And once that announcement came out, of course, every social media strategist started warning people, don't use all 30. Instagram said not to. And somewhere along the lines, I myself started using fewer hashtags and stopped putting all that much effort into it. Frankly, this year overall has just been tough for me with the home buying and the moving and a host of other things. So hashtags and Instagram in general just were not at the top of my list. But over the last few weeks, I started being more intentional about my Instagram strategy and testing some things out, specifically hashtags. And here's what I found. Yes, they still work. And I get more reach from hashtags if I use 28 to 30 versus when I only use a handful. In fact, and you may have heard me mention this in my emails or somewhere else on the interwebs recently, I've been getting a lot of organic reach, and anywhere from 20 to 50% of that reach is coming from hashtags. Now, look, I'm no Instagram expert, I'm not the most consistent, I don't have a big audience, but I have seen some crazy organic increases. It's a bit difficult to pinpoint specific overall numbers because we did launch the lounge in September and we were running ads, but I can see the difference because I'm looking at the individual post results all the time. Here's the thing though, hashtags aren't magic. They're a way for you to get your content in front of the people that are most likely to care about it, but it still has to be good enough content that they actually care. And in addition to the increased reach, I'm seeing a lot more engagement overall, anywhere from 12 to 15% per post. Now, what is really good for one is likely going to be different than what's really good for the other. So you're going to have to test some things out. But once you find the common thread, I recommend you just do more of it. I'm finding that long form carousel posts are doing the best. Some of my students tell me the sassier they are, the more response they get. And for others, it's more entertainment. You have to find what works for you. Oh, and one other note about all of this is that 2 of the posts that I shared recently, both of which were standouts in terms of reach, engagement, new followers, I've posted both of them before. It was over a year ago or so, and I did update the content a smidge, but it was the same post, like it was even the same Canva file. But there are a lot of new people in my audience since a year ago. And I got way more exposure and response to them this time around. If you're an OG, I wonder if you even noticed that there were repeats. And if you did, please come DM me on Instagram and no scrolling back trying to figure out which ones they were. Either you noticed or you didn't. My point is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. Okay, back to the question at hand. Do hashtags work and how many should you use? Yes, they work, and use all 30 if it makes sense for your post. Make sure they're more mid-size hashtags, nothing too big where you'll get buried or so small that no one is looking at them. And then, of course, make sure they're actually relevant to your post and your customer. They need to be hashtags that your perfect customer would be searching for or following. Think about not just the product you sell, but the outcome they're looking for and how they identify as a human. And that's a wrap on today's BizBite episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you on the flip side.